My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be Pauline Johnson, Video 21, The Reflective Journal. The novel to which I'm going to refer is Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am. But in this video, I'm going to read from my Pauline Johnson journal, The Making of Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, which can be found and accessed for free on my website, johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca. It was written while I was polishing the rough draft of the novel, after every word of the completed novel was in place. Now, the novel turned out to be 46,000 words, and the journal is 61,000 words. I'm going to read 5 passages as a sample of what the Pauline Johnson journal contains. So here's the first one that I selected from the journal. From 61,000 words, I selected 5 passages. As January 2020 moved on, I began to see how rich the information quarry could be when turned into an image quarry. Now, these are technical terms that I use. They never appear in the novel, but it helps me to kind of understand what I'm doing as I work on a novel. So, information quarry, a place where you go to get information. Image quarry, a place where you go to get imagery. Pauline Johnson's sister Eva and her grandfather and Chief Joe, the tale tellers, could be mythical characters to her. Real-life people in her own life who represent forces in her life that she admires and or fears. And the fact that she was not only a writer, as some of my other main characters had been, but was also a stage performer, as perhaps none of my main characters have been, was quite intriguing. Here was a lady, a potential main character for me, who lived about 10 miles up the road, up the Grand River, from my house, and she had trod the boards and presented her work. So the whole concept of imagery as performance opened up for me. What we are and what we seem to be to others. What we see ourselves as and what we want others to see ourselves as, and so on. I always look for a rich image field for my potential novels. The presentation had opened up the Pauline Johnson potential image field. The biographers in the documentary had narrowed it down. Now my own reading had opened it up again. So the Pauline Johnson life, the Pauline Johnson poems, highly complex, I thought at first. A little too simple, I thought, when I read some of the short biographies and looked at a documentary. But then looking in more detail at the poems and the biography, seemingly highly complex again. So I went through 3 stages there. Okay, here's the second passage that I've chosen from the journal. In January 2020, an interesting question arose, which had been part of my working thought for my whole 24 novels to date, but hadn't been a conscious theoretical thought as far as I know. It arose as I wondered at what level to pitch the image consciousness of the proposed main character, Pauline Johnson. I knew that she would be different in temperament from my previously written main character, L.M. Montgomery, but it was intriguing to speculate just as to how she would be different in image generation. She would be more accepting of the negative experiences of her life for sure, but at what level of her consciousness, subconsciousness continuum would she be creating imagery about those experiences, both positive and negative, of her life? In a way, it was academic as a topic, as my novels never indicate at what level a certain image is being created in the mind of the main character, not even whether a thought which seems to be a surface, present moment indication of action, walking with Chief Joe, for instance, is actually an action or the memory of an action, a simple act, or the image of a deep-seated body of imagery which has a certain value in her life and which is being used as a measuring tool against which other people and actions in her life, expressed as images, Eva, London, vaudeville, can be measured. Nevertheless, it intrigued me, and still does, that when I read my early heroes, Virginia Woolf, Joseph Conrad, Marcel Proust, and Henry James, I must have assumed that there were two categories, two levels, two compartments of thought, the conscious and the subconscious. This was how I've always understood Freud, though I've never read him and felt it important not to read him. But I had changed from using the term preconscious thought, which I'd found in criticism of the writings of Virginia Woolf, to using the term the multi-consciousness continuum of thought, from the most conscious thought to the least conscious thought and everything in between. How many novels deal with all those levels? In describing my own work, it was important that I not write imagery that would be true to the sensibility of John Passfield, the writer, or to the sensibility of Ellen Montgomery, the previous main character, and present it as the imagery of the new main character, Pauline Johnson. I would say, though, that I do not contemplate changing any of the imagery in this rough draft, which I was polishing at the time, for the reason of inappropriate sensibility, but that I expect to reaffirm my sense that at some level of her mind, in some compartment of her mind, every image in this novel is a Pauline Johnson image. So finding the imagery that that particular character would think with is very important, and I think I succeeded. Here's the third passage that I chose from the journal. In January of 2020, while writing The Making of Ellen Montgomery, I was still assuming that I would write the novel John Passfield's Saturday Morning before my Pauline Johnson novel. Well, I did go on to write this novel, John Passfield's Saturday Morning, but after the Pauline Johnson novel. The Pauline Johnson novel took over, you might say, and became the next novel on the list to be written. As I usually do when a rough draft is completed, I thought of future novels. I actually had 3 novel topics in mind during that month and thought about them all as potential variations on the theories and the techniques that I developed in that time. Much of my thought was about the nature of my novels in general, but most of my specific future novel thought was about the topic of Pauline Johnson. I asked such all-novel questions as, 1 paragraph or 3 paragraphs for each image unit of story? What about the balance of narrative image cycles and deepening imagery, minor cycles? The use of secondary minor characters as mythical embodiments of forces in the main character's life. Well, these are all technical terms, and I assume every author, writer has technical terms that help that writer to get a grip on this topic that is really only a topic and a few ideas, and help move that topic forward so it becomes eventually a novel. When I came up with tentative answers to these questions, it was in response to the Pauline Johnson biographies and writings that I was reading at that time. So think of novels in general, number of future novels, but Pauline Johnson started catching my imagination and giving me ideas that were usable. Number 4 of the 5 sections I'm going to read from this journal rather. In January 2020, I used 2 terms for the first time in my notes: information capacity and image capacity. I'd been writing some of my novels with only 1 paragraph per image unit of outer frame, the surface story of the novel, and some novels with 3 paragraphs per image unit of outer frame, but in each case it was an intuitive decision on my part. However, in planning and writing the novel about Ellen Montgomery, I'd solved a problem which had given me trouble in a number of previous novels: how to get the effect of the present in the past, present is the past, and past in the present, and past is the present of Oedipus the King by Sophocles and of the Ibsen dramas, such as The Doll's House and Hedda Gabler, without showing the past and the present as separate elements. as these plays do, in the sense that the past is on a separate train track and going to crash into the present on a separate train track in the climax of the drama. So I didn't want that. That aspect of these dramas was not for me. In Oedipus the King, the past is a definite negative, which is poisoning the present, and is shown in time to be doing so. And since nothing can be done, it is a tragic situation with no way out. Well, I didn't want that. In Ibsen, the past is also a definite negative, which is poisoning the present. And since we are modern people, we can clear the air and go on to have more realistic and therefore better lives. Nora does so and Hedda chooses not to do so. Well, I didn't want that. On the contrary, my novels present the constant interaction of past and present in the mind of the main character, not as definite poison or anything definite, but as the imagery by which the main character is thinking in an attempt to solve a problem which is known only to her, and the reader is aware of the imagery but must supply a speculative interpretation for that imagery if there is to be any meaning to the novel at all. The solution to the dilemma of how to show the past and present interacting simultaneously was quite simple. So we all have books that we admire, books we learn from, but it's important to know the difference between the books that we admire and like to read and enjoy and the books that we want to read. Are the books I'm going to write going to be derivative, just kind of borrowing ideas from other people? Or are they coming out of my own experience and therefore reflecting my own personality, my own view of life? So I think I solved that problem. Number 5, the last one I'm going to read of these segments from this journal. The whole idea of image tension is fascinating. I tend to make a decision to write on a certain topic without knowing my sources in great depth, and to then have to puzzle out potential shortcomings in that information quarry. For L.M. Montgomery, I Gave You Life, I decided to employ the novel Anne of Ingleside without having read it, simply because it was the last Anne novel which L.M. Montgomery wrote. I then wondered whether the imagery of that novel would be simplistic or would yield complexity. I also planned a duet duel. Duet is harmony, duel is disharmony, duet-duel, between the two main characters, L.M. Montgomery and Anne, and wondered whether Anne would be completely passive in that exchange, as she had no power with which to bargain about her future. So what if you created a novel with one strong character and one mild character? Would that be a terrible novel? In this case, I had to wonder whether my sense of the temperament of a proposed main character, Pauline Johnson, that she was able to take the negatives and the positives of her life and career in a better balance than that of my previous main character, Ellen Montgomery, would allow for any tension in the imagery of the potential novel. What if you have a main character for whom everything is okay? Does that give you a dynamic novel? Well, I wondered about that with Pauline Johnson, who seemed to really accept the ups and downs of her life with some kind of equanimity, not necessarily all the way down into the depths of her mind, but certainly on the surface. So what to do with that? If the premise of my novels is the interaction of imagery, the battle of the images, in the various compartments or levels of the mind of the main character, what would the image tension in the mind of this main character be generated by if she was taking everything in her stride? However, as the research reading moved on, and as the planning and writing moved on, I saw plenty of opportunity to solve this problem, this image tension problem, without having to, or wanting to, or being able to change my sense of the temperament of the main character, Pauline Johnson. So when you're writing about an historical person, you want to be true to them, but you also want to be true to yourself as the writer. So you have to find that connection between the two that works. And I think I did. Here's a conclusion after having read the 5 journal passages. Here's the note that I place in each of my journals, with the note title is changed, but with the rest of the words intact. The Making of Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, is a journal which records my reflections on the process of writing the novel Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am. I am involved in a novel writing project in which I'm exploring the novel form as a means of expression. A novel is the working out in detail of one idea. It is a structured idea pattern which conveys meaning through the arrangement of imagery. The combination of simplicity and complexity that the implications of one seminal idea demands leads to the planning, writing, editing, and polishing of a many thousand-word text. In order to make each novel as good as I can possibly make it, I have attempted to be as conscious as possible of the process whereby the single idea that suggests the topic of a novel is expanded into a complex web of supporting ideas. In the interest of economy and productivity, I have striven to find the ideal balance between my creative urges and my critical insights as a novelist. In the pursuit of the conscious knowledge of an essentially subconscious process, I have sought to articulate the basic underlying principles by which I am seeking to order the disparate elements that cluster around the original idea of the novel. In order to devise the best possible working method, I have developed an interactive exchange of ideas whereby the exploratory, reflective, and creative aspects of novel writing can interact continuously throughout the mental journey that is the writing process. I have found that the best way to do so is to work in 3 forms at once: a planning notebook, a journal, and a developing text of a novel in progress. So the 3 companion books, the novel Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, the journal, The Making of Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, and the planning notebook, Planning Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, comprise the 25th installment in a series which traces the making of each novel and the development of my theory of the novel as an art form. More information about the series of novels, journals, and notebooks can be found at johnpassfield.ca, JOHNPASSFIELD.ca. The journal and planning notebook are both available for free access for personal use. So just go to johnpassfield.ca, go to journals, and click on the icon cover. Lastly, thank you for watching this video.